Cloud hosting has revolutionized the web hosting industry because it offers incredible flexibility at very low costs. Best of all, it's 100% scalable and completely in your control. Similar to traditional hosting, cloud servers are housed in data centers across the globe. To understand how cloud hosting works, we need to understand what the cloud is. Say, for example, we have a data center with two servers, each with the following specifications: 2 gigabytes of RAM, 512 gigabytes of hard drive storage, and 5 terabytes of monthly bandwidth allocation. If we were to combine the computing power, storage, and bandwidth of these two servers, we'd have 4 gigabytes of total RAM, 1024 gigabytes of storage space, and 10 terabytes of monthly bandwidth. You can think of this total pool of resource as the computing cloud. If we were to add additional servers, CPUs, RAM, and storage, it would increase our cloud computing capacity. In this illustration, we now have 9 identical servers, increasing our cloud capacity, including CPU, storage, RAM, and bandwidth, by a multiple of 9. To understand how cloud hosting differs from traditional hosting, let's first take a look at the downsides of traditional web hosting. With the traditional hosting packages we explored, you probably noticed that the packages available were very standardized, meaning you pay a fixed monthly cost and are allocated a certain amount of resource per month, including CPU, storage, and bandwidth of the server. If we used anything less than this allocation, we still pay the same fixed monthly cost. If we went over our usage allowance, we pay a costly overusage fee. Another issue was the jump from the best shared hosting package to a virtual package was quite steep. There was no solution available if you needed more resource than the shared hosting could offer, but not quite as much as virtual hosting solutions. If our website was very resource intensive, we could opt for a dedicated server. As powerful as the dedicated server was, what if we needed even more CPU, RAM, and storage space than the existing hardware configuration offered? We would need to physically keep adding and upgrading physical hardware components. To make it more challenging, the server would be stored in a data center, so an on-site technician would be required to do the work. This could incur significant costs, and even more importantly, your website would be down for a period of time, unless a backup server was created. Cloud hosting provides an efficient solution to all these issues. The key difference is the way in which resources from a cloud computing network can be utilized versus traditional hosting. Cloud servers allow users to create virtual machines and extract as much resource from the cloud as needed. The cloud itself can be infinitely scaled to meet the needs of the applications it hosts. This means you can tap into the cloud and create a virtual server that best suits the needs and resource requirements of your website or application. Rather than being hosted on a single instance of a physical server, as with traditional hosting, the website is hosted on a virtual partition which draws its system resources from an extensive network of underlying physical servers. If you find this a little bit confusing, think of it as installing a tap to a large water supply. When you need more water, you open the valve and increase the flow. If you need less, you do the opposite. The tap can be turned on and off at any time. In this comparison, the water supply is the cloud. The tap controls the flow of water, or in our case, system resources such as CPU, RAM, storage, and bandwidth. Cloud hosting features utility-style costing, meaning you only pay for what you use. Let's take a look at an example to better illustrate the concept of cloud hosting. You want to start a membership-based online movie streaming service like Netflix and market it to US-based customers. Since your site is new, you're not expecting too many subscribers or visitors to begin with, so you need to keep hosting costs at a minimum. Over time, you plan on bringing in investors and launching a marketing campaign for your service. You expect your service to grow exponentially and require a hosting solution that can best accommodate your goals. Let's compare the life cycle of this business relative to traditional hosting services versus cloud hosting. With traditional hosting, you would likely first register for a shared hosting account, perhaps the most basic package to begin with. So you'd have to set up your entire web application on this package. Setting up includes uploading files, testing your application, and configuring your database and email service. This is a fair bit of work, as you'll see when we set up our own server. Throughout the first year of your streaming business, you see gradual increases in traffic and periodically upgrade your shared hosting account to the best shared plan available. This is relatively easy. There's no extra setup, just a simple upgrade, and you're still on the same server. In year 2, you start noticing your web page is frequently down, and your hosting company provides you with a notice indicating that your website uses too much resource for the shared hosting packages. This means you have no choice but to upgrade. Moving up the ladder, you start looking at VPS hosting solutions. The cheapest you find is for $40 per month. You realize the package would be way more than you need at this time, but there really isn't any alternatives. You commit to a 1-year subscription plan for the basic VPS package. Since you have now moved to a VPS server from a shared hosting account, you'll need to set up everything again. This means uploading, testing, and database and email configuration all over again. At the very minimum, you'd likely experience a 1 to 2 day downtime as your domain name resolves to your new server. In year 3, you notice a substantial decrease in traffic because a competitor recently launched a new streaming service. Your website barely gets any traffic, but you really don't want to go through the headache of downgrading back to a shared hosting package. You plan on coming out with new features that will likely win your visitors back in year 4. Since you don't want to downgrade, you stay on your existing plan and continue to pay $40 a month for the remainder of the year, even though your resource requirements would probably have needed only a $7 a month shared hosting plan. In year 4, you introduce many exciting new features to your website, and your customers quickly take notice. You see a huge spike in traffic, and none of the VPS packages are able to keep up with your resource requirements. To make matters worse, your hosting company keeps hitting you with costly overusage fees. So you decide to switch to a dedicated server. Moving from a VPS to a dedicated server, you go through the setup all over again. This will be the 3rd time that you've had to go through this. Also, since you're changing servers again, you can expect another downtime of at least 1 to 2 days as your domain name resolves to this new server. In year 5, your application continues to grow and outstrips the pre-assembled dedicated solutions offered by your web host. Now your web hosting provider will need to start upgrading and adding physical components to your server to accommodate the new resource requirements. You start to notice your server administration bills and monthly fees really adding up. You also realize that after all this setup, Downgrading to a lower VPS solution in slow months would be very impractical. Essentially, you're stuck and committed to paying for this dedicated server regardless of how much or how little system resource you actually use. Now let's take a look at what would have happened if you had initially registered for cloud hosting rather than traditional web hosting. In step 1, you would create a cloud hosting account with the provider of your choice and create a virtual server. You would configure your server so that it suits the level of traffic you expect to receive, which at this point isn't much. Let's look at some basic plans offered by a popular cloud hosting provider. Here we can see that for $20 a month, we get double the performance in every aspect than we did with the GoDaddy virtual private server solution, within the same price range. Furthermore, these packages also offer per hour billing. That means if you turn your server off, billing stops. There are no monthly or annual subscription fees. You only pay for what you use. We use this particular website, linode.com, because their pricing packages are fairly simple to understand. With your server set up with cloud hosting, you're now in a position to scale your infrastructure up and down as your website application needs. So remember in year 2, when we had a spike in traffic? All we need to do is tap into the cloud and upgrade our virtual machine. We can add a CPU, a hard drive, more RAM, and more bandwidth, all at the click of a button. Now what about year 3, when we had a large drop in traffic? Well, you can downsize your server just as easily as you upgraded it. With the click of a few buttons, we can remove CPUs, hard disks, memory, and bandwidth capacity. We could go on, but by now you probably see that due to its flexibility, scalability, cost efficiency, and reliability, cloud hosting has gained considerable notoriety as a great hosting solution for websites and applications of all sizes and complexity, from small static websites with only a few pages to large-scale dynamic web applications.